It's recording.
So just to move forward then?
Yes, you do.
Is there anything else on your agenda that we need to be?
No, you're up first.
about?
Nope. We really just have housekeeping after this, so all the times for you guys.
All the time. Well, I am Jessica Luisos. I'm a water resources engineer at SLR Consulting. And I've been working with LCPC and the rest of our team on this project. But I want to say hi.
Hi, I'm Josephine Allen. I am a water resource engineer for SLR.
And I'm Doug Osborne.
And we do have joining us online to listen, stay tuned, is Roy Schiff. I don't know if so he's on our team as well. Maybe he'll keep up. So we are working on the Lamoille River modeling project. We're mainly going to be focused on your area here in Johnson. We have been kind of we have presented pieces of this modeling to both your planning commission and flood board and special meetings over the time we've been working on the modeling with different projects in Johnson. Probably the last time we did kind of an update and then kind of looked at specific projects here was in 2019. We were looking at maybe doing some cutting in some locations, filling in other locations to provide both flood relief and maybe identify some areas where some appropriate for development what's going to happen. So that was kind of the last time we used this model here in and we're going to talk about what's been updated since then, and as well as the general expansion that's been done. So this is our agenda, and that blue squiggly line drawing thing is actually the depth mapping along the Lamoille here in Johnson. So kind of exciting. So first off, we're just going to give a general model overview of what we can use it for, show you the demonstration, and then go into some alternatives that we've been looking at. So we do some initial results of looking at potential projects. So just starting high level, this is the Lamoille watershed in white, and then you can see all of the towns as well through there.
Here we go.
And you as Johnson are kind of smack dab in the middle of the watershed. So the modeling effort has created updates to areas like here in Johnson where the model existed, but we've also expanded it upstream and downstream to include for the first time Hardwick, Fairfax, and Georgia, and added some additional tributaries. So this is actually the first time that the Guyon has been included. So kind of zooming in here in Johnson, the Lamoille main stem is 8.3 miles, and we are now also including, as outlined in red there, 3.8 miles of Guyon. And I say it both ways. I don't know how. Guyon?
I say both.
I say Guyon.
Okay, good, perfect. So
No one cares. Okay.
You and then
Just don't misspell it.
You gotta hide
Right.
it and talk.
The hidden ancient.
What's nuts?
It's in the Bible.
Guidance
Close that of
or the Guillaume.
Close that of even.
I always heard good.
Which makes sense.
okay,
Mhm.
we're still on young Guyon. You
Yeah, that's the view you want.
The 3.8 miles. Where does that stop?
So it stops upstream of the covered bridge.
Ship upstream of Scrivener Bridge.
This is
Must be. It's 3.
That well, it's like it's past that.
I am immersive.
Is it the first 3.8 or the last 3.8?
Yeah.
What is it stop?
Did you go up to the power dam on that part?
no,
Oh, okay.
no, it's all in Johnson. You can kind of see that red line is the town line. If you drive up
Can you zoom in on the source?
There you go.
There we go. All right.
It won't, if you're showing somebody else's screen, that's not gonna work very well.
It worked.
We
Do
did
it.
get it bigger.
Yeah, a little bit more.
Oh, in?
Think so.
Well, it's the powerhouse bridge because Rivero's property isn't highlighted.
You may need to zoom it out. Right, title at the top.
Got it.
so.
3.8 miles of Guyan.
Oh.
It's beautiful. You've done a great job.
Important question. Must answer it.
So.
It's an
as
important
we
question.
Back
We must
to
answer.
center, so this map just generally orients. People to the middle of town, you know this area very well, a couple of things pointed out, town office, Street Bridge, Cross Street Bridge. The model has more detailed information at each of these green lines where we have cross sections. So this map is generally just showing like kind of where we have that more specific detailed survey information. So
It's fighting you.
You're doing great.
see what you get it is. Interesting.
I think it looks beautiful.
Yeah, so that.
You could try that, yeah. Turn it off and on again.
Yeah, it's always.
What a down plug in.
Double click to enter full screen.
It's the same. Better.
Oh, original sign.
Hit to window.
Yeah.
Hey, hey, magic.
I mean, totally.
Oh, risky.
Oh.
So if you wanna zoom though.
Oh, it undoes it.
Tori should not zoom.
Double click
You should
again.
Zoom on your side, not have Tori zoom.
I agree with that.
You know what I have.
Okay, so here's our map with our cross sections, let's just.
It's not about you, Tori, it's about as soon as you will, it's not you.
Yeah, it's their name. I can't figure it out. Wow.
Okay, we'll just move right ahead. So one of the things that the model is built out of is the terrain. So understanding the elevation and all the different locations. So this color coding is the terrain. So you can see kind of in the teal color, the Lamoille River. Picture. And the beyond coming in. And where the cross sections are, and kind of that yellowish is lower land, and the colors increase up through like the red and gray, which are higher. And all of the model data is kind of draped on top of that. That terrain data. So what I was supposed to point out to you is this pink line. Pink line kind of through the Sterling market is, for example, when you look in the model, it looks like this. You can look at it in cross-section view. So the idea is that you've now taken a slice through the ground, through the river, and you're looking at it from upstream. So in this case, you can see a Sterling market, and it's on Railroad Street, and the river in blue, and other information like the land cover, roughness values we've used. So this is just kind of when you get into the model, what you have. And the elevation data is then either from the LiDAR terrain or in the bottom of the channel where the LiDAR doesn't show, we get that from the best source available. So that might be from FEMA data, from our survey, from our field measurements, or whatever is the best information. And what's nice about the model is that we can kind of continually update, like as we have a project in an area, get new updated information in an area we're looking at for a project. One of the other big inputs to the model is the flows, so understanding how much rain then translates to how much water is in the river in any particular location. So in the watershed, we have it broken up into all of these sub watersheds that drain into the model at kind of the blue dot areas. We also have gauges, USGS gauges that tell us what the flow is at those two red locations. So the FEMA flows from the last FEMA study were from 1980. We have received updated FEMA flood flows that just were kind of created based on the new information. And that's what we're using wherever those are available. And for the tributaries that didn't have one of those flows calculated by the new FEMA study, we have scale of flows by drainage area. So what do those flows look like? That's what we call hydrology, the amount of water that we see in the rivers. So this plot here is the gauge information from the USGS stream gauge. So for every year, which is across the bottom axis, the highest flow that the river saw in that year is plotted. That's what those dots are. And you can see on the vertical axis, the flow, or they call it discharge, in cubic feet per second is on there. So we've called out a lot of the big ones. You can clearly see that, 2023 was quite big. There's also, we have a large flood in 95, and so the other ones plotted here. All of those are lower than the 1927 flood as measured by the gauge. And this is information that's kind of used to be able to figure out what the flows are and model in numbers. So I just thought this was an important point to show. So the original FEMA study that was done in 1980 only had the information up to 1980. So that's our blue dotted line that goes across and ends at 1980. That study had a FEMA flow of, for the 100-year flood, of 18,900. The new model that we're presenting here tonight includes all of the flows up to last year, and it is higher. So what this means is that we know that, and we can see those dots are getting bigger. The flows we're seeing are higher, and when you do those statistics to figure out the recurrence interval of the 100-year flood, now we're seeing a bigger amount. So the maps we're showing you, the 100-year flood is not the FEMA data. This is based on our model with our updated terrain, our updated survey information, and bigger flows. So just to understand that that's what you're going to be seeing. And Doug's gonna walk through, what are the things that the model's showing us, and I think as planners, this is kind of a nice overview to really kind of get the big picture.
Yeah, so, so here's a list of, the things that we can get from the model. And on the right, here's another cross section looking at that same cross section with Sterling Market. On the lower beyond. So, first and foremost, which, we focus a lot of time on is the water surface elevation. For the 100-year flood, the 50-year flood, and so on, what is the water surface elevation at each cross section? And how does that affect nearby roads and buildings and such? Next, next thing we can do once we've run the model and the software knows the water surface elevation of each cross section, it can then interpolate floodplain maps. And so here is an example of a floodway map coming through Johnston. Just to orient, I know it's kind of small. Here's the Pearl Street Bridge. and then coming around under Main Street, and then start Market, the confluence with Lamoille. So- So that's just showing the extents of the inundation. And then some of the other things we can start to look at are the flow characteristics like velocity. Here we're looking at the same flood and a range of colors that represent the velocities of the water that's moving either in the channel or on the floodplains. And so here the blues are the slower moving water. You can see there's a call out of 0.1 feet per second down near the confluence. And then the greens, yellows, and reds get faster and faster. You can see the falls leading into the Pearl Street Bridge, seeing a velocity of 9.5 feet per second, and then along the bend close to Route 15, leaving town, about 4.5 feet per second. So, you know, being able to tease these things out of the model really helps, you know, if you're thinking about what are the risks of erosion, or, you know, are there places where, you know, we need to be thinking about armoring or other things. Next, you know, we can look at the actual depth of the flooding. Again, here the dark blue is the deepest, which, you know, is in the channels in the Lamoille River in the Guion. You're seeing the darkest blues, and then the lighter the blue gets, the shallower the water. You know, so again, near the confluence area, we're calling out about 1.4 feet of depth, and then, you know, in the main channel of the Lamoille, you're seeing about 8.5 feet of water in this flood scenario here. So, you know, we've looked at a couple cross sections, and then this is kind of the other way you can look at this model, which is a profile view, we call it. So rather than standing in the river looking downstream and you kind of see that cross section, this is if you were to take a cut down the river, you know, so you're taking the elevation along the profile of the river. This is showing an example down near the Fairfax Falls Dam. So you see the ground is higher as it's moving towards the dam, and then there's a steep drop to the lower reach, and you can see the filled in water surface moving downstream to the left. And something that's, you know, really helpful when you look at this profile is it really starts to make it clear where water is being held up throughout the model. Particularly, you will often see this around bridges, certainly dams. You know, but this is looking at the Guion for the 100-year flood that we've modeled, and we're going to get more into this. This is just a quick glimpse. But you see the Main Street Bridge downstream, it's pretty flat as it's starting to be affected by the Lamoille, but you see this drop from upstream to downstream of the Main Street Bridge, which is really telling us that, you know, water's not getting through there as efficiently as it could. Something about the bridge or that setting is causing water back up upstream and increase the depths upstream. So you see that, you see that again up at the School Street Bridge as we're getting out of town. You know, the water is coming down the steep gradient, and then it really flattens out coming to the bridge, and then steepens again. You know, so those are things that, you know, really jump out at us and say, hey, is this somewhere that we can look at alternatives and get that water surface to decrease upstream of these bridges.
Does that cause the off the downstream of the School Street Bridge? Does that cause the velocity to go faster beyond that point? There's the two slides I'm just trying to connect the dots between the two slides you just showed, this one and the one slide or two before.
Right. So the School Street Bridge wasn't on that slide. We weren't going that far upstream, right?
Yeah, you're looking at Pearl Street,
Right.
but Pearl Street, off the back of Pearl Street, it was a high velocity, it was dark blue.
Mhm.
But upstream was low velocity and got almost red. But you're right, you didn't go up far enough, so that's why I asked the question, like, is there something about that section that?
So this, you know, it's hard to see, but this red is where it's coming down the falls into the Pearl Street Bridge, you know, which is causing those high velocities. And then it goes through the bridge and flattens out, you start to see those lower velocities, which, you know, then correspond to, you know, that's where you're seeing this steep drop just upstream of Pearl Street, are those high velocity, goes through the bridge, and then, you know, it's low velocity because it's, you know, you can see the slope is really low. You know, in some cases, you do see those increased velocities downstream of the bridge. You know, it really depends on the setting. You're not seeing that here at Pearl Street Bridge. But that, you know, that's something you can see in the model of the case.
Although generally, water will move faster if it's squeezed,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
So especially inside a bridge, right?
Between the abutments.
So here, we just wanted to back out, you know, and show the whole length of the model that we've created and are working with. This is just showing the main stem of the Lamoille. On the left at station 0, is the Arrowhead Mountain Lake down in Fairfax. And the model goes all the way up through Hardwick.
60 miles.
Wow.
So there's about, you know, almost 70 miles shown here. That channel distance, just to be clear, is, you know, as you go along the river, the distance that you're moving. You know, and so this is really kind of an interesting way to look at it. You see, you know, how steep it is upstream of Hardwick, sort of flattens out through town, approaches the Wolcott Dam, and then, you know, it's not as steep, but still, you know, still relatively steep, going through Wolcott, down through Morrisville. You know, you see another, you know, the dam in Morrisville there, and Hades Falls. You know, and what you kind of see when you narrow in on Johnson is, you know, that there's this slope break. We call it downstream of town. You know, and that's the Beal Falls.
Riffle Falls. Riffle Falls.
That's this. You know, and then you see the channel really flattening out, moving into, you know, Jeffersonville, Cambridge, and so on. So it's just kind of, you know, it's interesting to see where you are in the watershed. Think about, you know, up in Hardwick, coming to Hardwick, you're gonna have much faster channel generally, the steeper gradient, and then it's kind of slowing down as you move through the watershed. You know, so once we built our model, we want to make sure that it's, you know, representing what's happening in the real world well enough that we can then use it to look at alternatives. You know, so one of the ways that we do that is, you know, look at pictures, look at high water marks, look at videos, and compare it to what our model is showing. So here we have a photo of the Wrong Way Bridge. This is back in 2013. This is, we estimated about a 2-year flood. And you can see, probably those numbers are hard to read, but, you know, it's about a foot or two below the steel beams, the low part of the bridge. And then you can see in our cross section above it that, you know, we're kind of seeing a similar water surface where it's getting under the low part of the bridge, but it's really starting to approach hitting the bridge. You know, we're also able to compare to high water marks that were taken in the immediate aftermath of the 2023, as well as the July and December 2023 floods. There were high water marks taken by USGS, all around the watershed. There was a handful here in town. And this is comparing, a flow similar to what we saw in July of 23 to the high water marks that were taken. You know, and we're seeing that we're within a half foot, a foot, a foot and a half throughout town. You know, showing that we're generally representing what was happening. You know, there may be, pieces of that flood that are a little different than what we're putting through the model, but generally it's representing what's happening. And the goal there is to really make sure that, we can then use this model to look at all these alternatives and know that it's representative of what's happening in the real world. With that, Joe's gonna do a little demonstration of the model itself. Share.
So I'll just get set up. Any questions about what we went over so far, general overview of modeling?
Is there? I do, for the USGS sensor readings, sounds like that was done as a response to the flood. And it looked like there was, thing on your map, you had 2 spots that were consistently measured. Just 2?
Those are the river flow meters.
Oh, the gauge.
Gates.
Yeah, they've been there for like one dot, so they're for 100 years only.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. And like, how can we get access to that
Well,
data?
NOAA.
Something,
I can,
Just.
I have it, I can send it to
Google
you.
Lamoille River flood.
Yeah, NOAA,
Gauge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Johnson
Oh, no?
Law.
J1D1.
There's
Okay.
a couple of companies that actually let data and then do their own. Not
Prediction.
models, but like their own splash.
and they do a prediction and they're about 4 feet off.
Wow.
Oh, good.
Biggest prediction, but
Yeah.
that gauge is across all those fields.
Yep.
It's above,
Yeah.
the Ross. Dogs that.
No,
Yeah.
not
This is
quite
much
watch it.
better, more accurate. We
Yeah.
tested it in 2024.
So while we're kicking up, was there any more, like how in depth was your site analysis on the actual river bed? Because the model is like gets us close, right? But 2023 flood actually changed the river profile considerably. Like
Yes.
in 2024, so it's not even acting like it was. You said you're using, whatever it is, ANR data or FEMA FIC data.
It's a mix, so.
As government data.
Yeah, a lot of the cross sections, we surveyed in 2019, so it's not all the way back in 2018, but you're right, and then there's some that we surveyed for this project. But, the budgets have, surveyed for every single location, so it's mixed.
Yeah, it'd be costly.
Yeah, so it's definitely a mix. And, so the river very bottom doesn't show up the LiDAR, but the LiDAR does show everything above the water. There's some variation. We don't have every single bar change.
So I guess the reason I was asking about that though is, I don't know, at least to me, it seemed like the flood in 23 was kind of a surprise. I mean, we knew it was happening, but I don't know if everyone else felt the same way. Like, I was just, when I went down in the morning, I was like, oh my God, what happened?
It was fun.
I'm sure it was exciting, but I guess what I'm wondering is there a way we can monitor the data, get the data, however we do it, to make sure we can warn people earlier?
The data got better for the next 2 floods after that. And there was definite warning, as a person that lives on the river, there was warning for that flood as well.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
So the
23, but
the response from the 23 flood did,
The 23,
Make
yes.
the
made
warning better?
Made the warnings better for the next year.
okay.
I think the answer is yes, like what's really nice about this model is that like, and you here at Johnson are really. I guess I would say a lucky community in that you have a gauge, USGS gauge is here. And with this model, I think you can kind of look at what a gauge level is, like a flow on the gauge, and then. Look at the depth mapping that goes along with that flow. And,
Extrapolate.
and maybe even different businesses are looking at that, so they'll know. Kind of for this,
Oh my god, I got it.
like,
Erase.
for particular, for particular, like, gauge flow, you now have this map.
Press
More
and hold.
accurate now, to be able to look at like, what the depth might be in either someone's yard or over roads or.
Okay.
I do think it's a really good tool for that, to be able to kind of match up the gauge data with that, and then there are the predictions. I know they're not
Yes,
perfect.
Yes,
you
but
know,
at least it
it's
gives you
like
a,
better match.
well, and then what's really kind of nice is also on that website, you can see what the level was for the 2023 flood and what they're predicting. So if you know how it affected you in that time, then you have that
Right.
opportunity to do a little bit of discovery.
Got it. But I mean, we could potentially have some snapshots
I have
That
a
are-
response to you.
pre-created.
So, we were very lucky to have Seth on call in December 2023 and in 2024. And Seth actually used this modeling tool that we're gonna see. And gave us I would say they were extremely accurate, representations of what we were gonna see, and as things changed through the rain events. We were calling Seth, and Seth was looking up we were asking about where Kylie lived, for example, and like how close are we, and Seth was like, you have 2 inches before it's gonna start flooding over in that area. So it was really accurate, and it really helped us figure out whether or not we needed to go door to door, like how we coordinated with emergency services, and we could say like, what if this and what if this, and Seth was like things in real time. So
It was.
Oh,
yeah.
no, that, that was awesome. Okay. Cheat sheets.
Doug didn't say anything.
Our perspective, like, it's made all the difference, because in 2023, we just were watching the gauge on Dog's Head, which is not an indicator of what's happening here. I mean, it is an indicator, but it's not accurate in terms of what the impact is going to be to specific neighborhoods. This modeling was really it was really good, like we could ask specific questions, and it was really nice to have a real answer that we trusted. And we weren't proven wrong after the fact, like in the event, it ended up that it was true, like if the rain stopped and we didn't get another, half an inch, that would result in more height, then we're good. And that's what happened, we got lucky that that's what happened, but it really did allow us to respond in a real way that would be helpful to anyone.
Good. So the model you found to be accurate. My question was just around. Do you typically make snapshots of like about 5 feet increments, just so that people can know like what number they need to be worried about?
Seth and Tori and their colleagues are going to help us kind of get the output of the model onto their web, like GIS mapping, so that anyone could go in and basically like look at either like the 2-year flood and what the depth would be at a particular spot, and the 10-year flood and what the depth or velocity would be at any particular spot. So you could kind of zoom in and then turn those different floods on and off and figure out the depth. So
Nice. Okay.
that is, and that's probably actually a really good way to, Joe's gonna kind of show us what it looks like in here. You would probably have more of the snapshots that output. That wouldn't be like quite as interactive, like you wouldn't necessarily be able to like run a whole new scenario if you did something, like, you'll have the output.
Maybe if they made a mitigation, you would get mitigation results
Right.
necessarily,
You
but we
would-
could see
yeah.
what how it applies to existing conditions.
And we could potentially get those layers for our GIS to just enable and disable.
Yeah, if you have a GIS set up, yeah.
So your model. We have to guess at what the rainfall is going to be. Your model is very accurate if we tell you what the rainfall is.
The flow, yeah. So-
Well, in terms of figuring out where the flood's gonna be. You need to know what the precipitation is going to be to make your model work. Yes or no?
Those, I think those are in,
It's from our specific flood events, so, yes.
So we don't know what the future.
We do have some things, right, like we're on the National Weather Service through VEM.
I understand that as it's going on, it's very accurate while it's going on.
Yeah.
But in terms of developing a floodplain map for the future,
Well, that's what, we'll see that, they'll talk about like saturation and water levels, I think, in the tool, that's what you mean. I think we should see the tool,
all right,
and we answer your question.
I'll hold my question till later.
Perfect. Yeah, lots more to show you.
So just to orient ourselves, this is the main village area, so the Creeks come through Pearl Street Bridge here, the house. Around Bend and then going to Main Street, and then here's that confluence area, which is Lamoille is flying up through here and around, but down this way. So when we look at the model, look at it using the terrain, which gives us a really nice, Jess introduced this, a really nice relief map of where's the high elevations, where are the low elevations, and this kind of allows us to see where is the water gonna fill in those low spots, and as the water rises, where is the water gonna get to? So when we turn on the existing conditions, that mapping, we can go through all the different flows that we put into the model. So here, this is that 2-year flood. So you can see the water is kind of within the banks of the Edon. It spills out a little bit onto these lower floodplains in the confluence area, and in the Lamoille, the water mainly stays within its banks. And a cool tool with this is you can see as I'm hovering over the map, it gives us the depth of like what is the depth in this specific spot, or like in this specific point right here, it's 5 feet deep. And so there's a lot of cool interactive tools that we have access to through this model. And with that, like something that you mentioned in terms of the data, like this is a living thing. We can go into this a year from now and update it and say we changed a bridge, we changed an area, like we can, or did some more surveys, we can further refine and make this better and better as we get more information. So looking at a few other flows, here's that 10-year flood. So kind of still a smallish flood, but getting a little bit bigger. The water's spilling out to these lower floodplains a little bit more. It's like really filling up. In the confluence area, it's accessing this little lower floodplain down here. And moving even bigger to the 25-year, and then 50. You can see the water's really spilling out onto the road, through here. And that this is the 100-year. And you can kind of see there's all these blank areas. These are all the buildings are. I can show you, here's a lot with the cross sections. There's a lot of labels going on right there that are dramatic, but we have all the buildings are in the model. You can see those platforms that popped up are those buildings. And going back to the flows, we also modeled the 5-point here. And this is super dramatic. This is a really big flood. This is not a flood that we've seen. Maybe it's 1927, similar to that. And you can really see that this whole light green area is fully filled up. That's when it's all filled in. And a lot of the town is inundated at this point, and the water's very, very deep in a lot of places. And one thing that we really wanted to look at, because this spot is really interesting on the Lamoille because of the confluence. And a lot of the village, even though it's on the Guion, it is really under the influence of what's going on in the Lamoille. And so kind of to get a better understanding of that, we looked at these crazy extremes, which are probably not gonna happen in real life, but we wanted to see what, if there were different floods happening on each of those different rivers. So this is a crazy example, but what if the Lamoille was at a 500-year flood, and what if the Guion was only at a 2-year flood? So really low flow in the Guion, really high flow in the Lamoille, and it really shows that the influence of the Lamoille in the village, like even if the Guion isn't doing a lot, like the backwater for the Lamoille goes all the way up to the Pearl Street Bridge, so this whole area gets filled in, regardless of what's even happening on this small river.
You see that one, should we zoom in, so it's like from the Pearl Street Bridge and the, I don't know, maybe just. Point, yeah.
This is pretty much what happened in 2023, because the guy was not really, I mean, it was flooding a little bit, like it was definitely over its banks, but it was not over its banks, the same with oil.
And then we looked at it in reverse. So what if the Guion was really, really full, and what if the Lamoille wasn't? And you can really see, even with a really big flood on this smaller river, it's not impacting the village almost at all. So it's kind of mainly staying in these lower floodplains, in the confluence, these lower floodplains by this Big Bend. And I think this is a really important information as we think about like mitigation strategies, as a lot of the impact and a lot of the strategies might need to focus more on what's happening.
One of the just to. It's really interesting.
So it's a little slow, but here's a velocity, kind of have a brief snapshot of this as an presentation. But again, you can see these higher velocities as it's going over the falls, upstream that Pearl Street Bridge. You can see how the water's kind of shooting into town around here. And there's much slower velocities out in the plains. There's a question about the velocities through here. It's super steep, and the water is crashing down through these falls and bridge up here. So you can really see how the river is transitioning from this really steep gradient upstream town, and then as it comes around this corner and goes into the village, it's really flattening out, getting a little bit more mellow in terms of the velocity, kind of spreading out more. And that's why the inundation is a little bit more of an impact, whereas here you might have more of a risk of erosion, like velocity related damages. Good.
Well, yeah.
Go back to the.
So I think, one of the big things is like, well, what are we gonna do about the flooding? Okay, we've got this model, we know what's going on with the flooding, we experienced it, we're kind of representing it in the model. And one of the things that I think is pretty neat about it is that it represents flooding, well enough compared to what we've seen, to be able to test alternatives, to be able to say, okay, I have a constriction at a narrow bridge, I see it's backing up water in the profile, and I'm gonna say, what happens if I make that bridge twice as big? Or there's a building that's in the floodplain, it's blocking flow, what happens if I, remove that building and like dig down the land to create more storage of the floodplain? So here's just a general list of potential alternatives. Some examples from, these happened to Jeffersonville nearby, I'm sure you've seen them. These were identified in the very earliest stages of reading this model, and, it seemed like they've been really quite effective at, kind of reconfiguring the flow of water around that village. And, Joe was just talking about the, losses, sometimes we're actually looking at protecting infrastructure from erosion or something that can use the model to that. So these are the kinds of alternatives we're looking for. We have identified quite a few different potential flood mitigation projects that we looked at as alternatives. A lot of them are shown up on this screen here. So this is zooming out even further. All the things that are called out are things that we were thinking on the difference for flood. So starting downstream, looking at the 15 bridge, that's downstream of town near the intersection of Cutback Road, and potentially opening up or digging down land to create more floodplain. So all the spots that are kind of a maroon, magenta color there are locations where we thought this might be a spot where we could dig down the land, remove that all that dirt from the floodplain, and create more space for the river to like spread out and slow down, drop out sediment, drop out trees and ice, and also just create more space. You'll see a lot of those kind of pinkish blobs are around bends, to really help with water as it's trying to drain out of the village. There are two that are in green. One is the Holmes Meadow floodplain project. That one is actually out to bid right now and should be happening. And there's one in the Vermont Studio Center in green. That is one where there is a partially completed design for that project. Vermont Studio Center continues to be interested in moving that forward. So we have all of these. We also did look at the two Route 15 bridges. One of which I call Main Street Bridge, we did 115, so the two Route 15 bridges. And what could be done there. So we are gonna walk through kind of what our initial results are showing, kind of for all these different potential projects. So starting at West Cove Road, skate park area. This is a location, as you know, has had a history of flooding. There's been two kind of current ongoing buyouts, plus all the prior buyouts that were there. Skate park and kind of open space is this, looking at the terrain, you can see and closer to the river, there is let's see if I can get there, a lower floodplain. This kind of yellowish area here where Joe did point out this was flooding at a lower flood. So smaller floods get up on this area. And then there's like a bump up. So the remainder of this area is kind of this greenish color, so it's higher. And the idea is, can we possibly store more water here and create more space for floodwaters? So this is the existing 100-year flood. A lot of the area does flood already, including the neighborhood, kind of the northern piece of this floodplain. And there are, a lot of people who continue to live in this area as well. So thinking about what might make sense. So this kind of olive color area, you can see like this funny Snoopy head shape looking thing. All the way down, so there's the two buyouts here, a constriction, and this whole area that's just south of the skate park. So the skate park would not be dug down. The skate park is kind of where the cursor is there and would be touched as part of this. The rest of it, including the road, would be lowered, an average of 3 feet and actually quite a bit more in some locations over this whole area. So in cross section, you can see there's actually like a berm or like a high point right next to the river. This is something that's like pretty bad for flooding. Like it means that there's so much more water in the river before it can get out and over that berm. So these are especially things that we want to get rid of. So you can see that berm there and digging it down, you know, a variety of depths. So at close to the river, it's actually quite a bit movable. And this does a lot, like a lot, I would say. I know it might not seem like a lot, but like a foot. So we're looking now in profile. So remember, this is along the length of the river. The project area here at Westcom is in this area here. So we're seeing, on this plot, the black line at the bottom is like the bottom of the river.
We're bigger.
Yeah.
More vulnerable.
It's a different color. Do you want me to follow the cursor with my? Just.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Thank you.
I could draw, draw the work you actually.
Okay.
Oh,
even better.
Okay.
The project area. And then this here is the railroad street, so this is actually upstream of the village. This is the bridge, this big tall thing, the bridge. And then this black line at the bottom, this is the river bottom. And then the pink line and the blue line are the top of the water of the flood, so the elevation of the flood water. So the blue one is the existing conditions model water surface elevation. And the pink one, which is a foot lower, is if we dug out Westcombe Road and needed a flood. So, so that flood lowering of a foot extends all the way up into the village. And, you know, if we flip to the next page, which I don't know.
Is that,
Go back to your drawing and do clear drawing and it will.
is that one foot of bouldering? What model did you run that?
The 100-year showing for this scenario. Ooh, oh, no.
It's the same drawing, so well, it's just the bottom of that menu, is this clear drawings. Is a garbage or a full trash and a garbage.
so would it have more effect on a smaller flood then?
Fine, so I don't have the results for that here, so there are results for all of them in here. But this is actually looking, now we've turned the corner and we're looking along the Guion itself. So here we are, so kind of at the bottom of this plot here on the far left is the confluence of the Lamoille River. So the benefit of the Lamoille River is now turning the corner and going up through. So, you know, kind of the wastewater treatment plant is somewhere right in here with this 0.6 feet lower water surface. Then we get up to Main Street and there's even some benefit upstream of the Main Street Bridge. So, you know, extending, you know, 0.7 miles up to, you know, the Pearl Street Bridge. So, and this is actually like a pretty big difference. Like we've found that, you know, a difference of a foot or, you know, like 6 feet makes a big difference in a flood. Then the amount of damage and the amount of time that you're needed, you know, whether or not people have time to get in and out during the flood. So we're pretty excited about this. We do have it in map format. So I'm gonna show you two maps. This is the existing map. Showing the existing conditions of flood. So if you kind of just put your eye on one particular location, wherever you care about, and I'm gonna flip to the next one. And you can see both the numbers, different call out locations change and the extent of the flooding. So one of the spots that's pretty exciting to look at is, you know, over here at the neighborhood, kind of right at the skate park. You know, if I flip between the two, there's existing conditions. And proposed solution. So a lot of those homes and the road is gonna go by where at least 1.2 feet of flood in scenario, and then you know, even up on, you know, this road here.
How does it affect the home that is still at the end of Wescombe Road? It's down low.
So that would be this one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Sure.
Question.
Cause I mean, she's still there and was not affected by the 20.
Look really close. We don't
It's
put
pretty
a lot
unchanged.
Yeah.
right on that particular, that's something we can report out on specifically. And I'm
Doesn't seem
sure,
like it does much for the center of town.
well.
Does something.
Oh, yeah,
It
yeah.
does, it does do something, so.
Saves burning our farm.
What is the lot?
2 point,
I'm just looking at that.
like 0.6 feet is, you know.
Be a house or two.
certainly
Yeah.
Was.
Could be a federal store.
Could be pretty important to some.
No underwater wall, so
It's
it's not gonna happen.
Couple look like home.
I'm not gonna save the general store.
General store's fine.
This flows just.
We're all in trouble. That's something.
They're showing us all things. I'll show.
Not me, I'm higher than that now.
Okay.
So this is just Westcombe Road and it's just the one scenario and we don't have the full list of the printouts, so I don't know exactly about Sheila's.
Yeah.
But we'll, that is.
I just wouldn't wanna put somebody that wasn't in danger in more danger.
Yeah,
You know, I mean.
yes, not want anyone to be in more danger.
Can I add one thing, just, so as we're going through the alternatives, keep in mind that this is like the first out of like the impact, when you're looking at these. To go from this to a project that's actually happening, there are gonna be a lot of details, like. What happens to Sheila's house, right?
Yep.
What happens to the access for the people on the other side of Western Road and the village sewer water pipes? Those are the kind of things that if the modeling shows there's significant flood reduction, then they do the next step of further scoping and just and address a lot of those types of things. So, definitely take note of those details. So if the community decides to move forward, then they're all thought of. But don't think that this means that there's gonna be. Look exactly like this without consideration of all of the other things that I'm sure go bigger ones right now.
The other thing is that's interesting is that even the guy on like into more village. To me, that's outside of the village a little bit, more center of village, like even those buildings center of village were covered versus not being covered, right? Like. It seems like the level of magnitude in terms of individual households impacted, this is a pretty significant. Impact to the number of households.
On Railroad Street.
Oh, yeah, on both sides, right, on both sides of the model.
It might not. We're seeing where it's getting. No water, but it's also the difference between. 6 inches of water. Crazy.
6 inches can mean a life, right, like. We're lucky we didn't have lives lost, taken in a life.
And I think that's a really good thing to point out, like, if you have 6 inches less water, you might have driveways or roads that. Are accessible in a way that they wouldn't otherwise have been. You just be able to like get in and out of this. So we do have lots of additional things to go through, so we're super excited about that. We're also really excited, and specifically stated that there is some funding in place to look at that particular project in more detail. I know some of you have been already aware of that, but it is something that there's clearly benefit, clearly like worth looking at closer, and
It's pretty
LSPC
cool.
and the town have like worked together to like take that next step of like looking a little closer there and happen, which is exciting.
So I'm gonna run through a couple more alternatives for skiing, have some really promising benefit, and then we were just asking about some combinations of what if we do floodplain and just you know, look for our maximum benefits. So now we're moving up the Eon, up to Main Street. You know. When we look at this and we look at the profile and, you know, you can really see it in the terrain. You know, you're going from upstream where you have broad floodplain that, you know, the water's able to get out of the channel and spread out to then constricting into the bridge, but, you know, also, you know, like this fill around, you know, where the bank is, you know, is extending out into what was, you know, was floodplain, it's been filled and it's, you know, causing the water to have to narrow down to get into the bridge and through town. So we looked at a couple of alternatives, but what we are showing here and what we found to be potentially the most benefit is constructing a dry bridge next to the existing bridge. This is something, you know, you see in some places. Jessica showed a picture in Jeffersonville where we installed a dry culvert. You know, so as floodwaters come up and you're getting out into the floodplain, rather than being backed up, you know, trying to get into the one opening, it has like a relief valve. So here's the existing. The existing bridge is about 75 feet wide. And you can see there's a narrow channel, and then on both sides of the river, the ground's pretty high. And this is the alternative that we looked at. So it would be essentially be building a similar sized bridge next to the existing bridge. So that existing bridge, you know, which we understand is relatively new and is in really good condition, would stay, and a new bridge would be built to the west of it. So this is as if you're looking upstream, or you're standing upstream looking downstream. The new bridge on the right. It does include digging out some of that. If we go back to terrain, it includes digging out some of this, you know, this red area, this fill, you know, to open up this constriction and allow enough space. You know, currently there wouldn't be enough space to put, you know, another structure of that size. So it includes some floodplain restoration on the upstream side, and as well a bit of a cut down in the health center property here.
So that's on the Union Bacon Health Center side of the bridge.
So that's
Right.
yeah. So when we do that and we look again at the 100-year flood, we see some really promising results. You know, again, this is on the Eon. The blue is the existing 100-year flood, and the purple is the 100-year flood with this new bridge configuration. And we're seeing up to 1.7 feet of lowering for this size flood, you know, carrying almost all the way up to the Pearl Street Bridge. You know, so everything upstream of Main Street, you know, all those homes that are experiencing flooding, you know, you would see more than a foot and a half of reduction in this size flood. So, you know, this is something we're really kind of excited to see that, you know, as Seth was saying, this is a big project. You know, there's sewer lines, there's water, there's sewer pump station. But, you know, those are things that we have, you know, modified and dealt with in other similar projects. You know, when we're seeing this much benefit, kind of all options are on the table.
This model is 100-year on Gaia.
On both. On both, okay, yeah. And that's, you know, again, Lamoille's down here. And, you know, you really see how this lower part is pretty flat because the Lamoille is up at that 100-year. You know. And then where it bumps up as a bridge, that's where there's really kind of an opportunity or something you can do on Eon to reduce flooding upstream. So again, we have the same view that we're looking at just a minute ago for the Westcombe alternative. In this case, I want everyone to kind of focus, you know, Main Street's here on the area of Main Street and then upstream. You see that currently there's is call out the 3.0 feet is the depth of water on Main Street for the 100-year flood in existing conditions, and this 3.4 feet is the depth at the church, just upstream of the bridge. So if you watch that area as we go to proposed, you see, some of the inundations, contracting fewer buildings that are being inundated on the upstream side of Main Street. But in particular, you see those flood depths, instead of 3 feet of water on Main Street, you have, about 2 feet of water. And the church is experiencing, instead of 3 feet, 3.4 feet of flooding, about 1.8 feet. So that can make a really big difference. At the peak, it also means that the duration of, time that floodwaters are inundating Main Street is less, because you're cutting off that peak. So, certainly seems like a really promising option, something we really want to keep looking at.
What does it do to downstream?
Yeah, so, in this case, because, in existing conditions, you are having that water back up. But once the upstream, village and the floodplains are full, then it's just all flowing over Main Street, right? So you're not really seeing a change from existing to proposed downstream. Although we're opening the bridge so it can go through more efficiently and stuff, once we get up to that high flow, in either scenario, it's all getting down into the downstream channel, either way. So,
So it doesn't change.
as we flip back and forth, you can see that the only changes are along Main Street and upstream. And we're gonna get into some of the combinations as well in a second here. To start seeing where we can get that downstream street as well. Another floodplain restoration area that we looked at is Lamoille Lane. This is down at the end of Railroad Street or Lamoille Lane. It's a bit of difference depending on whether you're looking at Google or John. That's what it's called. The West Cone is up here. And so this is really kind of a nice natural place to say, okay, if we're lowering floodplain here, then it is coming around this bend and opening up and lowering the land here could really allow the water to more efficiently move through these bends downstream of town. So this is the terrain. Again, you can see a lot of it's, the more greener colors. You can actually see in the LiDAR here, kind of cool. You can see these little dots are different stockpiles of material that were on the property when the LiDAR was flown. And here's a photo that we were given during one of the floods. At this point, the river is full and it's starting to spill out onto the parcel here. But if you imagine if all this land was few feet lower, it would have already been accessed and it would be spreading out and again acting as a valve through this area. So here's another cross section. It's kind of a similar depth as the West Cone floodplain, about 3 feet. We do show a change in the terrain on the backside, which is representing the rail trail, which would have to be moved to the back of the floodplain. And then here is the result of that. So, by itself, we're seeing about 0.3 feet of lowering. Not as big as the West Cone alternative that we're looking at, but when you look at them together, it can really start to add up. And especially, if you're saying you go from Holmes Meadow and then down to West Cone, and to Lamoille Lane. Really started to link these floodplains and spread out water.
The combination of some of these things change the velocity enough that they'll cause other problems.
It's a great question. You know, we have the ability to look at that, of course, and, you know, it's something that nothing that's jumping out immediately as, you know, a big risk, but, you know, as we move forward, we'll look closer at, you know, is that increasing erosion risk upstream because water is moving a little quicker? You know, maybe there's places that would actually be armored to deal with that.
Right, and like, and if we do something in the village, just outside of the village, it's gonna cause a problem, that's gonna have an impact in the village. You know what I mean, like maybe not an immediate impact, but a 10-year, 20-year, 50-year impact. Just because velocity changes the way. It's very constrained, right? With what is created another.
And I think that's what's neat about the modeling, that we don't need to just speculate, I think we should just try it out.
So the next thing we're gonna, you know, really dig into the details of is our big combined alternative. So here, you can see the footprint for Lamoille Lane, floodplain, the Westcombe Road floodplain. We have shown our Holmes Meadow floodplain in green again. You know, we didn't show the individual results here. This is an active project that will hopefully be constructed in the next period of time here. And then combining with that Main Street dry bridge alternative. What we see, this is looking on the Lamoille, the main stem. So this is really where you're seeing the influence of all three of those floodplain restorations along the river downstream of town. You know, and what we see is over a foot, 1.3 feet of lowering in the Lamoille, you know, up to Railroad Street. You know, and that's really crucial where the Eon's coming into the Lamoille. If the Lamoille is putting, you know, over a foot lower, and that's that much less water that's backing up into town. That's preventing the water from Eon getting out as well. You know, and this benefit extends upstream of Railroad Street as well. It's still almost a foot upstream until we get to the steeper falls. And then we move to the Eon. We see, you know, some really quite big decreases into town. You know, again, that 1.3 feet of reduction on Lamoille then translates to a little over a foot of reduction in the lower reach of the Eon, you know, as it's passing by the wastewater treatment plant. You know, and those things right at the confluence. But, you know, when you combine those floodplains with the Main Street Bridge, we're starting to see 2.5, almost 3 feet of flood reduction. Coming into Main Street and, you know, for all the buildings and infrastructure upstream of Main Street. All the way up to the Pearl Street Bridge where see the existing and the proposed together. So we go again to our plan view, you know, I know we have a lot of numbers on here, you know, but if we focus on a few, you know, first, you know, maybe kind of look at this spot on River Road where currently you're seeing 2.1 feet of flooding during the 100-year, and that reduces to less than a foot. And you can really see, you know, the extent decreasing as well. And then you move up to Eon. You know, if you kind of choose a spot, whether you want to choose your own or, you know, I think some of the biggest differences you can see are right in this area around Main Street and the buildings just on the upstream side of Main Street. Where you're seeing really a number of buildings taken out of the floodplain. And for those that are remaining in the floodplain, you know, 2.5, almost 3 feet of flood reduction. And then
Well,
again,
can you go to your latest model,
which one?
the existing?
You know, so 3 feet of water on Main Street there.
It will show.
It won't be there. That's fine.
The village city.
Yeah. It's. It's here, it's called out.
Yeah, well, that's why I asked about the existing one. Because it doesn't show us any longer.
So it's showing water getting, you know, kind of coming up and inundating the one side of it beginning. You know, again, 2023 was a bigger flood than this that we're showing.
Yeah, I think that's right, because it's
But
showing
that-
going into the parking
But
lot.
that at the beginning was because it bumps up 100-year flood mark, right? It's a 100-year flood mark, you have 1% having per year or whatever. So. The 100-year flood that in all of your examples
original.
is not the new 100-year flood, it's the 1980
It is the
100-year flood.
100-year flood, it is the new 100-year flood, flood, so it is the higher flow. But I think what Doug's saying is the, 2023 July flood was bigger than that.
Yeah, it was like two, like it was like 2 years.
Yeah, so in the 200 foot range. something like that. So this, it is true, like in this depth mapping here, there are spots that you saw flood that aren't shown.
Regardless of your entrance thing, try to grab by everyone to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I think the either 100 year would have this building flooding, it would have water up close to the building, not the building flooding.
So how do we plan where to put buildings?
You
Alpha.
can use these,
Huh?
but you know, I think one point is that, you know, like the 1927 flood was bigger than the 500-year, but like, so there's always the chance there could be a bigger flood. You know, I think, and you know, here Doug's showing like a variety of floods. But I think it's something to keep in mind, like if we're looking at that 100-year floodplain mapping, it's one scenario that could happen. It's like a large flood, but you could have a very large flood, or you could have what you saw in December, which was 50. So, you know, so I think you as planners, all of us as planners can use these tools to say, okay, well, you know, what level of risk is acceptable? And I think FEMA has said the 100-year flood is the number we're gonna use, because we have to use a number. We have to put a line on the map, so we will use for planning purposes, but, you know, some communities might say, you know, we don't wanna accept that level of risk, we wanna use the 500-year flood. I think, and that's something in your flood regulations, you can make those decisions, and these are just the tools that we can provide you to like talk about that, maybe at your next meeting, like what is the level of risk, you know?
But we have flood maps, Charlie, like we have flood maps, but
We have a 500?
it's not, there is a radius that the 500 goes to, yes. It's part of the FEMA maps.
And we're gonna have more maps.
We need more maps. We don't have enough maps.
Yeah, so I think, you know, it's a great question to lead into this next slide, because, you know, we have been showing the 100-year flood. And we certainly, like, as we're going through this, looking at these different ranges of floods, right, to say, what are the benefits for smaller floods, you know, a flood we might be seeing every other year, every couple of years, but what about the 2023 or even bigger? And so what we're looking at here is 3 more flood scenarios, the 10-year, 50-year, and the 500-year. And for each of those, there's a blue line, which is showing the existing, and the purple line, which is showing proposed. So, you know, if we start with the 500 again, you know, we're looking at these top 2 lines. You know, and we're seeing, you know, again, you know, if we are restoring these floodplains on the main stem of the Lamoille, we are still seeing reduction in flood levels. As you move up, you know, through the Main Street area, we're not seeing as big of a reduction in those flood levels. And that kind of goes back to what Joe was talking about and showing with, you know, when there's a really big flood on Lamoille, it's just backing up into town, it's backing up all the way almost to Pearl Street. And so there's just really not a lot that we can do here in town to change that. So I think that's why it's really important to, you know, to be looking downstream, because, you know, for every little bit that we reduce flooding in the Lamoille confluence downstream, that translates up into town.
While you're on that, what
Yeah.
the December 23 flood and the July 24 flood, whereabouts in the 10-year, 50-year, how were those?
23 was our number 4, it would be at least 50.
Yeah.
So it's the next slide.
It's not the next slide. We have many slides that are these questions are asked.
Before we go to this slide though, like that slide is actually a really important slide for people to understand, because I think it's really important to understand that 50-year floods are gonna happen often, and these mitigation efforts, they are, right, they're happening often enough at this point. Because on your very first slide,
Mark is booked up, right?
yeah, but on your very first slide, all of the highest floods, all of them were in our last month. So like the 50 years gonna happen, once you're, even though you're rescaling, I understand you're rescaling. But I think like the point being like that impact on that 50-year, because they're happening more often, and 500 is very unlikely to happen. Again, to us in our lifetime. But I think it's really important that impact factor of 2.5 feet for those medium-sized floods is huge, like that's huge.
I think we were talking during the December 23 flood of like within 6 inches of hitting water in the Lamoille apartment river.
It was less than that, it was like 2 or 3,
So
it was close.
the 2.5 feet in storm of that scale is much more frequent. It's very.
You can cut us off if you want, we can shut up.
So we can already social justice.
I think that
Um,
might should be up next, that's why I was asked.
Keep
Going.
I didn't know if you wanted to jump. That's the.
Keep going.
Just the really exciting stuff.
It's going to be exciting.
It's pretty exciting.
It's pretty good stuff.
This is pretty good.
Okay, so those were some big reveals, big combo. We have some other things we tested as well. We wanted to just kind of give you some information about, so. This is 2 more of the buyout locations. You can kind of see outlined in red there, both the bank and the health center, and if we would dig out this orange kind of Milwaukee fill that lost this. Pointer. Where's your pointer? Found it. Okay, so this big blocky kind of orange area, what if we dig that out? And we are actually finding some pretty good results. So this is the same bridge, so you don't need V-Trans to come in and put in a whole nother bridge. For the scenario here, this is something that, you know, maybe you have a little more local control. This is even like a shorter term project, you know, if those buildings are gone. So not as exciting of results as Oakland Bridge, but you know, 0.8 feet lower does make a difference.
It's
For
like half, isn't it? That was like half of the
yeah,
previous reduction.
It's quite good, yeah. So, I mean, this is, we don't have a ton of slides for this, but you know, just want to say like this is looking like a great project to.
And that's only those 2 properties,
Only those 2 properties, no changes to the bridge.
and no changes to the road, the school is right there.
No changes to the road. This would actually require some changes to sewer siphon, which kind of goes through there. So there might be some utility changes, but no changes to the bridge. Kind of moving downstream on the Guyon, gonna go back to the home of the Guyon. the Sterling Market floodplain. This is a location that has had quite a bit of inundation flooding. Part of the current file project. So what if we, kind of remove building, remove infrastructure from that space and turn it back to natural and dig it down? You can also see this is kind of significantly higher, this orange area compared to the river itself and kind of this lower green floodplain downstream. This is a little bit of a less exciting result. You know, we are really in that bathtub of the Lamoille River there. It's very much backwatered by, you know, during these large floods. So kind of digging it down, you know, we're just not seeing the flood levels come down.
Wow, if you build it up.
If we slow it up,
If it
yeah,
doesn't
if you build it up, you will have an impact. So, you know, and this is not to say that this is not a project. I think what we're saying is that this might have additional benefits to moving infrastructure out of the floodplain to, you know, creating a space for ice and sediment and debris to be like preferentially shunted off into the river. There's a lot of other benefits to floodplains that aren't always just about lowering water surface elevation, so. Just because this is the result based on water surface elevation doesn't mean that it's not something we continue to like have discussions about and like. Decide as a community like what to do there. I think anytime you're like moving things out of the floodplain and creating more space, there's benefits, so. But this is just the hydraulic result, which is only one piece of that bigger picture.
So it could change velocity or something.
Yeah, and it could change velocity, and that's something that we can look at with the model. We're not reporting out on it in this slideshow, because there's a lot in here, but it could have velocity changes, and like it usually does. Looking down further right at the confluence itself, there is this very interesting, big, very sharp S turn. As you can imagine, this is not the way water always likes to go. You know, I have this big kind of switchback here. So we looked at kind of, could we lower this area, not necessarily just dig it out, make a channel, but could we just lower this area to create more space in the confluence? I think one thing to point out about this area, this is the trigger flood, a pretty frequent flood, and you might experience this even every year. It does get water up on it pretty often already. You know, compared to a lot of the other floodplains that we talked about so far tonight. We did try it out anyway. There is, you know, very small benefit to water surface, and you know, there could be other benefits to, you know, just creating a better alignment, having less junk that's stuck on it, kind of creating more space. So, you know, this could have other benefits to just kind of water flow in the confluence, but
Could
you
it
know,
risk
it's really
more backflow if we brought it down more? Like, could it have a negative impact on
I don't
from the
I
line
don't
up?
know, like, you know, the Lamoille River is really like a wall of water for the dion. Like, I'm not sure that you're gonna create like a turn. And it's the thing to think about a little more. You know, as Seth said, this is really very like high level planning. Like, where are we seeing big changes? Where are we not seeing big changes? And you know, kind of really delving into like, what are these other co-benefits, something to have a conversation about. And then we did look a little bit further downstream too, so we'll just briefly go through this, and then we can have kind of more questions.
So yeah, we looked at this potential floodplain at Footbrook Farm, and the landowner kind of outlined this low area on the property that already is not super productive in terms of farming. And so he was open to potentially having this as a floodplain, and this is something that we explored, as part of this project. And kind of like Jess mentioned before with that confluence peninsula area, this area already is, flooding at the 2-year flood levels, so it kind of limits the amount of impact that floodplain in this area make. So looking at that with the profile on Lamoille, kind of right through the area here where that floodplain could be, we're only seeing about 0.1 feet of a difference. Moving further downstream, we wanted to look at the Route 15 bridge here, as well as potential floodplain on this this land right adjacent to it. And so you can kind of see how that bridge kind of does cut off the river at this point. And we were thinking that this could be a really promising opportunity where you could potentially widen this bridge out to give the river a little bit more room as it makes that bend. And so here's kind of what we did in cross-section view. So here's that existing bridge up here. It's 292 feet wide. And then we made it a lot bigger. So this is 442 feet. And this is with that lower floodplain elevation kind of on this left side here. And so through that whole property upstream of the bridge, we created this floodplain cut, which was about average depth of about 4 feet.
And again,
Keep going.
that's a.
Keep And so looking at these benefits, we did see a pretty significant benefit right upstream of that project. So through that farm area, through a few of those homes and businesses, through here, there's 0.7 feet of reduction. And the impact definitely decreases as you go further upstream. So like kind of right through town and through Railroad Street, it's only about 0.1 feet lower. So there are some local benefits to these projects, but they don't fully extend very far upstream. And
Did you say 3.1 feet?
0.7.
But after that,
0.1 feet in the village.
0.1.
okay,
0.
0.
yeah,
Okay.
misheard.
Imagine if you did that and you did Lenway and you did Wescombe, what that would do. I mean,
You
a
know,
lot.
guys haven't looked at, I mean, or did you look at the farmland? I can't get the guy's name right now, so. Right upstream of Dog's Head, huge area.
McClure.
Lord,
I mean, it floods there somewhat already, but that's.
That's upstream,
But that's
that's upstream
upstream.
of the town.
So if you clear that, then you have a problem downstream.
Well,
From listening, who's in charge? So
he's,
as a casual observer, I would think you'd start at the downstream projects and work your way up, because everything you do
can affect the person.
clears upstream, makes things worse downstream. So let's get rid of the proper downstream. And then we'll work all the way up to McClure.
well,
This is up to the. This
That's
is
up
not
to us.
us.
Okay, that's what we should do.
We presented.
excellent, Charlie, we're not taking a vote today, so,
Put it on the agenda.
no votes.
You know, I think we presented this sort of, we want to have your greatest attention for the ones that we felt like, kind of,
Yeah.
we were seeing the biggest impact on. It's not that we are saying these are the ones you should do first. It's, I mean, that's really a community decision and like landowner decisions and, you know, when you could get big bridges implemented. I mean, so the order of these, or even if you move forward with some or any of these, it's really for you all to grapple with.
So I did want to ask about that statement, though. So if the upstream was slowed down and a greater volume of space was created, wouldn't that help downstream? Or would it not?
Oh, question.
I mean, I think the answer is yes.
But how much? Yeah,
Quantifying that is hard.
Yeah.
Without getting too much into the nitty gritty. This model is looking at the peak flow. You know, so it's not accounting for. The rise and fall of, you know, the flood rate, which, you know, is how much water total. You know, so. Yeah. I mean,
yes, it's water, I mean.
I guess what I would say is like here, the storage that you're talking about needs to happen at the watershed scale, so it would be. Doing projects across the watershed will all add up to a point where you start to actually reflect like the actual flow. With the what 24,000 CFS that we're talking about, the size of these floodplains is probably not affecting the timing enough. It just doesn't have enough volume, like, you know, Joe had the West Cone Road volume, it was 60,000 yards, and so when you start to like compare the volume to the volume coming through every second, it's not enough to like, create a giant change in how much water's affected or making it down to the other parts of town.
Right, yeah, I mean, it makes sense, the. Slowing down the water entering the system, the tributaries and all the other estuary, like those, that's how you. Slow, like, that's how you basically elongate. The flow of that water, right, so it takes longer and is less intense.
There's research going on right now on like, how much is enough, how much do you, and you know, Doug and Roy are part of the team. Along with researchers at UVM who are actually like working on a study of like, how much floodplain do you need to restore upstream to actually like hold back enough flows, there's less getting to towns like yours that are kind of on the beat. So, you know, maybe next year we're gonna have like an actual square footage for you, but.
Okay, but that means that the city, the towns upstream of us. We need to be checking on them too, supporting them if possible, maybe.
Some towns are in this model, like Hardwick is going through the same process too. Where do they have spots where they can slow down water?
How will the Holmes Meadow project affect the town? Like, do you know? Like, I mean, I know that they're working on it. You know?
I just wanna put a plug in, the Holmes Meadow project, steps from ice sheet.
Okay.
The hope is that it helps with flooding, but the initial intent. was
Okay, so it wasn't
all
done
of the
for,
ice skimming is what caused that.
okay. For the squeeze on the corner.
I hope it does help, for sure.
Well, I didn't know if that would help the village at all. I mean,
It's gonna help, it does help the village in that it's, like you can see on this map that there's like, the river is now squeezing around a very tight bed right up against Route 15 there, and there's bedrock kind of as it comes around. So like opening up that constriction makes a difference, but, it's not big of difference in the village, it's a small amount, plus, you know, ice jamming.
it's
So where does the unjammed ice go?
on it.
Into Holmes Meadow.
So the velocity is low enough that it'll precipitate out.
That is a great question. We do not have an answer.
What was the
It's
question?
official.
Estimated cost to do the Holmes Meadow project.
How big's the grant?
So it's out to bid right now, so it's actually a cost we don't want to talk about.
Oh, okay.
And we actually don't have a current estimate because the soil management has actually changed since we had done an initial estimate. further back in the design, so I actually don't know.
So who pays for the project, state and the feds, all the above.
It's the, it's the Flood Resilient Community Fund, so it's, like a state flood relief fund.
It's paid for income tax, not property tax. I think too.
We have reached the end of our official presentation. We do not want to leave right away if people want to continue their questions. I know you said no official action, but you can continue the discussion.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes sense. If anyone has any questions that are unasked, then we do that, and then we'll just proceed with housekeeping items.
So you guys don't have any models for like street storage? I get a little nerdy about it, it's probably a pipe dream that makes no difference.
Oh,
like
it
the
does
large-
though, if you can,
The large.
Do it at
bodies of
scale.
Water upstream. Are,
Lake
Lake
Lamoille.
Lamoille. Arguably. And Elmore is. The Great River Reservoir is.
Yep.
There's that one in Harvard that's not really a lake. Whatever you wanna call
For
it.
the powerhouse?
And then I think the Greensboro. The lake in Greensboro actually.
Caspian?
Caspian. Weird pipe dream. I've kept asking, if there could be a coordinated effort. To lower each one of those 6 inches 48 hours before an event. That's not really gonna affect the biology a lot now, just. And then if you created, as the rain event started. You remove the 6-inch piece of steel, congratulations, it's gonna rain about a 6-inch piece in. And you create flood storage, and I understand that that's only 6 inches. So if you get 8 inches of rain, it's still not gonna take everything. And a huge portion of all of these little things for me is. If we had a foot and a half less in 2023, this building flooded, the fire department wouldn't have flooded. There's still would have been structures that flooded. Okay, I can tell about this. But is there a way to like incorporate that into the model? Some sort of volume wise, and then we can go to the state and it can tell us no at that one.
There are other types of models, so, for every project, you would pick these type of model, and this is a general max hydraulic, so we tell it the. cubic feet per second, it's gonna be located in different parts of the river, so. The model type that you can put is hydraulic. Hydrology model, so the hydrology model, you'd actually put in like those reservoirs. And rainfall, and like, we actually do calculation of those reservoirs, so it is another type of model. That, basically that. Okay. And, I think what you're talking about with the operation of dams is like, I think there are dams in the state that do operate. In a manner like you're talking about.
There's a lot of flood control dams
Yeah.
down south where they
Right.
build huge.
And I think it's a really good point, and maybe something to start to talk about, like at a bigger scale on the state, like, should some of these dams that aren't specifically from petroleum also be operated in a way that.
And that's discussions have happened, but, convincing somebody that a licensing for one reason, for another reason.
So that isn't us, and the model can't tell us. Storage, but,
I have a similar question to Evans though, about, because I was not thinking about it in terms of water control, but more in terms of floodplains and utilizing agricultural fields. A lot of agricultural fields, upstream of Johnson, like. Hyde Park doesn't really see flooding of residences at this point, which makes them, in my mind, a prime candidate to help with upstream water. Directly above us. Through floodplains in flatter areas, are a little flatter, some of the river flows too. anyway. I don't know, or staff didn't feel anything about. On the topic of environment that is.
I mean, I think that question,
Look at you, Seth.
yeah, but that.
Sorry, doesn't want to talk about it. She had a bad experience.
That question of are there any, like, key. Sites between the villages or upstream, Clear Farm, others. The model could be used in a similar way that it was done. With the look at those, have there been any like key bends or anything like that, key constrictions upstream that were between Morrisville and Johnston that have come up?
Something that will come up, and I think one of the big reasons that there hasn't been a significant amount of like, damage to buildings.
Is it worth making a key restriction?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is like, if we're focusing on restrictions, that's different than focusing on water overflow, and I was thinking about it more of like a water overflow, like how to. Utilize places that don't have those restrictions to help spread the water.
One of the problems with that is you talked about berms being an issue. And the rail trail goes through that
Yes.
plain, and it's a berm.
Maybe not.
Huh?
Maybe not forever.
Well, I would take the rail trail out, I don't care.
Well, you could
Come on,
put in
Charlie.
you could put in a culvert under a rail trail, maybe. I don't know, I'm trying, I'm guessing, I don't know.
No, but you're right, it is a burn.
It is a berm.
It's a berm.
Tori, do you want to share information that you have?
Excuse me?
Well, I
Oh.
was just thinking about what you said earlier, which is where a lot of the impact was. As a result of downstream projects locally, so I wasn't sure like upstream would have the same impact. Locally for Johnson is what you were saying. Downstream for village.
Well, so I guess there's an example, Otter Creek, where, you've got gauges where the upstream gauges show higher flows than the downstream gauges, because between the two, there's so many floodplains. That kind of attenuate or like slow down the flow. There's so many floodplains where the water comes out, it really does slow down the amount of water that gets downstream villages. So we do have examples of Vermont where we've seen there's these floodplains that do get water onto them, and it does slow down the amount of volume of flow downstream. So I mean, it is a thing. But usually it's at a relatively large scale, and where actually you see it somewhat here. Because when you start to look at the gauges, downstream gauge in East Georgia, the peak is kind of more spread out. So as the water goes down through, where do we have here, like, as the water, so you've got your gauge in Johnson, which is kind of right smack down in the middle there. And then it gets really, really flat before, like 40 miles, maybe 30 miles. Before you get down to East Georgia, and there are a lot of floodplains in there, and it is really flat, so a lot of that water does get out onto those floodplains. And it really like kind of dampens the peak. So, part of all the extra boring hydrology slides that we stuck at the very end, not bore you with, like, we do talk about like how, peak flows are actually like smaller per watershed size down there. As it does slow down, get out on all those floodplains, so from here on down. But if you look at the steepness, there are some parts of the watershed that are really steep and are gonna just continue trending down. But there might be other places where there could be more floodplain connection, also.
Or
So,
other
yeah, sure,
mechanisms to
it's-
slow it down, right? I was gonna ask that earlier, like, are there other mechanisms to slow water down? Because between Phoenix Falls and Downs Village, yeah, it's a little bit bumpy, but it's much flatter, right? We're getting the velocity upstream that you were talking about before. There is some flatness between Phoenix Falls and Johnson. Are there mechanisms to slow the water down? And spread it out like
Yeah,
both
I
things?
mean, there's all kinds of things, like stormwater on the pervious pavers, that, you know, like one individual rain barrel might not go up, well, they, you know, there's all these things that you can do, so some of your regulations that you have in place to, you know, reduce pavement, you know, shun water off the roads and into the woods instead of straight. You know, there's the hydrologically connected roads, like, I know it might be ridiculous, but we think about how much water gets collected by a road and shunted straight into our rivers, like if all of our
Quick.
uphill towns are getting the water off roads into the woods and not into the rivers. it Starts to add up, so I know it might not be like one project just in part, but. You know, I think the state has been doing different things, and some people might not like the MRGP program, it seems annoying, but like. I think all these things collectively add up.
Everybody.
You know, so I think the regional planning commissions being involved in this project are kind of an umbrella group to like kind of help. You know, maybe work on what's going on in the other watershed towns too.
Nice.
Everyone can buy into. The model and what it has to present. Work on it all together then.
And
Did you have
get-
something
we'll go
else on the
further.
branch there? Trying to say.
Not really, just that. V-Trans is open to discussing. Working on projects around the rail trail. TBD.
We are gonna be meeting with V-Trans, to talk about the model, with a variety of people who work there in different capacities, so, we will include that in our conversation.
So. This may be totally off. But it's not. Driving down Route 15. You go into Underhill and they got that big swamp on the. Left-hand side as you're driving towards Bloomington, and I noticed that the level has come down.
Yeah, it's almost empty.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, is that a flood mitigation thing or? Why is that
Or just the
occurring?
drought.
No, this was happening even when it was.
Had a
wet.
beaver dam.
Beaver Dam broke.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I think.
Okay.
Oh, shit.
Underhill
Ran the
Flats.
beavers off.
Damn rodents.
Huh?
Those damn rodents.
Yeah. So it's just coincidentally,
Yeah, I think so.
Mm.
I don't know if somebody did it in a
it's not a flood control issue.
Mm-mm.
Morning.
Damn good idea, not for humans. What are
I'm
you
just
doing?
wondering, so this model that.
Be surprised what I
we
know.
can Look at any town along this from Hardwick all the way, you can dial in and do calculations based on. So this model covers the entire.
Floodplain.
That's.
It's pretty exciting, and it's unique. I think we can all personally thank Seth for making this happen, and like his colleagues who have really facilitated this. We started in Jeffersonville in 2012, maybe. And kind of built out the Jeffersonville piece, and then kind of through many grant opportunities, the LCTC has like kind of enabled it to like to get bigger, to get geo-reference, so it kind of bring in the new LiDARs and LiDARs available. And in this effort, actually took the really innovative step of partnering with the upstream and downstream regional planning commissions to kind of facilitate actually expanding it outside of just Lamoille County, but the upstream and downstream communities to really make that connection. As far as we know, there's not another pool like this, in the state. This is unique. And, I think it's been, something to really applaud LCPC for the effort and really making that connection happen, over time.
Yeah, incredible tool. Yeah. All right, I didn't hear too many other questions, so why don't we wrap up this part? Thank you so much for coming. Please share